We recently had Major General Bob Dees in the Economic War Room to talk about resilience and the future of America. Now, as a reminder, General Dees served for 31 years in the U.S. Army in a wide variety of command and staff positions. I mean, phenomenal positions. We'll put all this in the economic battle plan so you can read about his amazing background. But we wanted to bring him back. We talked last time about resilience, and he's written a trilogy of books on resilience, Resilient Warriors, Resilient Leaders, and Resilient Nations. And I've read them, and they're powerful. There's a lot we can learn from them. He's pioneered a lot of programs, including at Liberty University. He's also been the National Security Advisor and Campaign Chairman for Dr. Ben Carson, and he now heads Resilience God Style, a national movement to restore resilience to every area of American life. But today I want to talk with him about economic warfare. General Dees, welcome back to the Economic War Room.
Great to be here, Kevin.
You've talked about resilience, and we've talked about the life cycle of nations and the future of nations. What did you learn from a military perspective about economic warfare?
Right. Well, I went to the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, which is a part of the National Defense University. And in the course of that, you learn all about the elements of national power. Clearly, one of the acronyms they teach you is PMSEI, but it starts off political, military, economic, and other elements of national power. The economic is always a critical element there, and some determine it to be a soft element of national power. But this day and age, I don't think so. I think it's the primary denomination for conflict is the economy, and we just look at China and other things, both internally and externally, and we recognize the economy. It's the economy.
Right. Yeah. Bill Clinton said, "It's the economy, stupid."
That's right. I wasn't going to say that. But.
Yeah. But, you know, I worked and did consulting for the Pentagon back in 2008, 2009, and we were in the worst financial crisis, you know, since the Great Depression. We've been in the worst since this, and you know, a lot of times. So it was a bad economy. And I demonstrated, I showed the data. We were under economic attack. The Russians and others were manipulating in the markets and doing other things to try and harm our economy. But most of the people I talked with in the Pentagon, they didn't get, they said, that's not in our swimming lanes. We don't understand that. We focus on this. And I felt that was a real deficit in our national strategic leadership.
It was. Hopefully we're better today than we were in that day, but not necessarily, because we seem to have turned a blind eye to some of the Chinese adventurism, and not just in the military in the South China Sea, but also in the economic arena that's been hounding us for decades, really.
Yeah, I think China. I mean, in 2008, our primary enemy was probably Russia economically. The Chinese at that point were more dependent on us. 2013, they actually switched. Xi Jinping decided that they wanted to de-Americanize the world, and China, which had been waging unrestricted warfare, really ramped up the economic portion of it.
Right, right, certainly. You know, I participate in a Thursday night Zoom call with West Point classmates. So last night was one of those calls. And it was interesting that they had a poll, a survey that said, what's the greatest threat to America today? And it had China on it, it had domestic violence or lack of peace on the streets in America. It had Antifa, it had our national debt. And we looked at all those, and most people said China and this and that. And as I thought about it, I said, I think the answer is our national debt, because if we are so far in deficit, and we are a debtor nation to China in particular and to other nations around the world, and if we apply our largesse, or what Gibbons in Decline and Fall would call immoderate greatness, if we apply our immoderate greatness to giving everybody everything, then we create this dependency, and we're going downhill as a nation. I think that's where we are. We have challenges there.
That's unbelievably insightful. I totally agree with that. It's been a blink of an eye from $10 trillion to $20 trillion to $30 trillion
Right.
in reported federal debt.
Right.
And we're over $100 trillion in actual liabilities. If the government had to present their books the same way a corporation does, unfunded liabilities, pensions offered, Medicare, and so forth, it's over $100 trillion. I think our tax revenues are in the $3 to $4 trillion range.
Right.
And our spending is in the $4 to $5 trillion
Right.
plus. The president just announced $6 trillion of additional new programs. It's really crazy.
In Resilient Nations, I define 10 elements of American exceptionalism. And then, as I mentioned in a prior broadcast, we analyze the United States in epochs of history. It starts going down drastically in 2001. That was not because of any moral factors that hadn't changed in a major way, and George Bush was the president, but it was because of the significant debt profile that we started to build up under his, and then it only got worse and worse and worse. And like you say, it's been a geometric increase in national debt, not just linear.
Yeah, you stop and think about this. Our interest rates have fell dramatically, first from 2008-9, and then secondly from the pandemic, where the Federal Reserve bought a lot of U.S. Treasury debt and forced interest rates down. But a normal interest rate in our lifetime has been in the 5 to 10% range for U.S. Treasury bonds. Right. 5 to 10% on $30 trillion is $1.5 to $3 trillion of interest alone. That could absorb almost all of our total tax revenue. What do we do then?
Right, right. It's almost like crack. We're addicted to these low interest rates. We're doing things that are not logical economically. It's governing our behavior, and then when that changes, if it does, we'll be in very difficult challenges.
We'll be stuck. Do you think? Do you think the strategists in China are aware of our debt situation?
Of course, of course. The Chinese, they devote in a command economy, in an autocratic society, and in a heavily militarized society, they devote far greater per capita to analyzing and having people actually look at specifics of the United States. You know, they probably have a tenfold application of labor and just manpower and resources to looking at us and trying to figure out this warfare against us.
Yeah, well, and the unfortunate thing is I think they have figured it out. I think they've made the situation worse. They fund things that make the situation worse. And they've been stealing our intellectual property, which is just siphoning off our wealth and everything else. They're huge economic threats, both domestic and foreign. So we're going to need to take a break.
Okay.
When we come back, let's talk about some potential solutions. General Dees, I think based on our talk so far, we both agree we're in economic war.
Right.
It has two fronts, the domestic front and the foreign front. We're facing it. All right, you're a general. Help us. What are our solutions? What do we do about this?
Yeah, well, I sort of think of another general, a guy named Napoleon. And he wasn't known for his economic greatness, perhaps, but he was a great strategist. And he said the moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. That applies in all areas.
Say that again.
The moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1.
Wow.
So
3 times the importance.
Right. So, for instance, in an individual basis, you can teach a soldier how to fire his weapon. That's the skill. But the harder part, the moral aspect of it, is the will. When do you fire your weapon? When don't you fire your weapon? How do you deal with the moral consequences of that? And so now let's ratchet this up to a national economic level, the same thing. The moral aspects of the economy, why we're doing what we're doing, is far more important than the skills or the trading or just making the profits. So I think we probably agree that this moral component of economic warfare, economic existence, is probably the most important of them all.
Oh, there's no question. And you know, Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. He was this guy, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments prior to writing the book, The Wealth of Nations. So it has to have that moral component.
Right.
Otherwise, we're going to go into crony capitalism, or we're going to ruin the environment in order to make the short-term profit. You know, all those things are bad. Those are the things that are bad about capitalism.
Right.
And I think they're misapplications. But we talk about moral democratic capitalism.
Yeah, well, I like the terms you use. In Resilient Warriors, I looked at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then I looked at the prevailing culture in our nation today. With life, we have a culture of death and violence. With liberty, we have a culture of dependency and appeasement. And that appeasement plays out different ways internally, domestically, and then on the international stage. And then finally, a pursuit of happiness. So, well, obviously, that's the debate between opportunity versus outcomes. And clearly, in a free market, capitalist society such as ours, we should be focused on opportunity rather than ensuring equal outcomes, as would be the case with a Marxist economy.
Right, because the only way to get equality of outcome is to dumb everything down.
Exactly.
To take it to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
It's a mathematical formula.
Right. Speaking of math, you're probably familiar with Fairfax County, Virginia, that is taking away advanced mathematics because of the perception that it disadvantages some. You know, that's a shot in the foot for sure.
Yeah, this whole idea that math is racist bugs me, especially having been a fan of history and understanding Hidden Figures and the whole story of how really some African American women served as the computers that made the space landings possible.
Of course, yeah, that's a wonderful movie. And then Dr. Ben Carson, I know you've had him as a guest. When we would be on the campaign trail, he would go into rock and roll about African American inventors, entrepreneurs, mathematicians, and he would go on for like 10 minutes. He would just one after the other, one after the other. You know, the real McCoy. McCoy was the guy that invented all these things. He was an African American. He would bring that out in appropriate detail.
Yeah, there's no question that we need to call people to the highest and the best.
Right.
And this racism of low expectations, soft racism, it really is damaging.
Yeah, oh, I totally agree, right.
So how are we going to turn the country back? We're going to go on this moral basis, right? And there's biblical principles here.
Right.
Debt being one.
Well, I think leadership makes a difference. And so when in Resilient Leaders and Resilient Nations, I talk about we the statesmen, not we the politicians. And the statesmen are guardians of truth, selfless public servants, and principled collaborators for change. And so we really need to hold our elected officials and then ourselves within the communities and our own leadership realms to the standard, that standard. We adhere to truth, we are principled collaborators for change, and we're selfless public servants. I think that's the way to start. There's a lot of other formulas, but leadership makes a difference. We got to have the right leadership first.
No, I think you're exactly right. One of the things you told me about what you do at your National Center for Healthy Veterans is you help them learn principles of finance, personal finance.
Right.
Why?
Well, we find that sometimes our military, blue-collar workers in particular, are financially illiterate for whatever reason. Perhaps their family didn't teach them. Perhaps they didn't learn it in school. And then when you get into the military, you're just rock and roll many times, and you don't have time to think about those things. So all of a sudden you pop out of the military, and maybe you've had a little trauma, maybe you're having a tough time transitioning, and then on top of that, if you don't know how to manage your money, you are really in dire straits, because now you're moving into a profession, you're going to be accruing some wealth, perhaps, or money at least, and you have to know how to deal with it, or you'll end up in the same place. And then secondly, I think, as you've pointed out, our military veterans have a real penchant for teaching others a lot of things. And for our veterans that have a acuity in financial management and things, they're excellent teachers and respected role models for others. So it's logical that they would dive into this area of the economy.
But you have to learn it first, right?
Right, of course, yeah, right.
So and here's the problem. Some of the best and the brightest Americans are American military and our veterans.
Right.
And yet if a lot of them are financially illiterate, they miss the basic economic principles that you can't spend more than you take in forever.
Right, right. Well, and they ought to know that. You know, an interesting expression within the military is that if you don't think logistics or you can apply it, the economics are important, then when you get hungry in the next war, call your mama. So the point is, there are these things that are less glamorous, such as financial literacy and financial management, that are necessary conditions for successful living. And you just got to appreciate that and learn about it and then apply it.
I think they're necessary conditions for successful voting and being a citizen. Because you look at the candidate that offers, I'll give you free this, I'll give you free that, I'll give you... My daughter, smart enough, in high school, smart enough to ask the question, if it's free college, who pays for it?
Right.
And the answer is the government pays for it. Where does the government get their money? Well, they either borrow it, which has got to be paid back, or they tax it.
Right.
And she's like, what's the difference if I'm paying a student loan or I'm paying higher taxes for the rest of my life? I'm still paying for it.
Well, your daughter is blessed to have been raised under your roof, I think.
She's brilliant.
Learned these things. Yeah.
Brilliant young lady. But anyway, so we're going to have to take another break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the future, how we can access some of this wisdom, and how we can apply it to help save America. General Dees, you've done a lot of hard things in your life. You've faced wars, you've faced political challenges, you know, in heated political campaigns. You've dealt with veterans committing suicide. A lot of hard things have happened in your life. What's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, well, a whole panoply of things comes across my landscape right now. The first thing that comes to mind is that he who is faithful in little will also be faithful in much. As a young officer, I had many challenges. My RTO drowned at my side, and you know, Jimmy Frizzell, just a wonderful soldier. I'll never forget that. Or pulling a soldier out of a burning helicopter, and then seeing a lot of other things over time. Or being having to evacuate a Korean town because of a terrorist threat, and then the Korean Congress calls for my removal from the Korean Peninsula on that very day. You know, the very people you help are lashing out against you because they simply don't understand the need for the circumstance. But the thing is, the last one you mentioned is this notion of veteran suicide and active duty suicide. In 1973, I was a platoon leader, went into the 101st Airborne. I'd been through all Ranger Airborne, snake eating stuff, and now I've been there for 3 weeks, and it's the night before Easter. And I get a call to go to Sergeant Smitty's house trailer. And not usually a good call. So I went, and he had shot himself, killed himself in the back room. After the first responders left, his wife, the widow, young widow, was there with her 3-year-old daughter. And at least I said, I knew how to ask, how can I help? And she said, well, we hid Easter eggs today. would you come back in the morning and gather Easter eggs with me and my young daughter so that we can give her a normal Easter? And that was a bookend in my military career. I went 31 years doing all these different things. I'm retiring, and at that time, the active duty military and the veteran suicide rates are higher than ever in recorded history. So over my 31 years in uniform, the rates were higher. We had thrown millions and billions of dollars at it, and the problem had gotten worse. Something's not right here. We got to try a different approach. That was the birth of the strategy for the National Center for Healthy Veterans that we're growing today at near Liberty University. And the point is to break the back of veteran suicides and to return healthy veterans to America. I would offer that our veterans need America's help in various ways, but more importantly, America needs her veterans now, the role models, the entrepreneurs, the educators, the people that need to be leveraged into our economy. They're the greatest source of military talent and expertise that can be leveraged on behalf of our economy, on behalf of our society, and we're not using them. We got to do that. That's what I'm called to do.
We owe it to them, and we need them.
Exactly. You got it. And so
I want to pull these two things together.
Sure.
Liberty University, that's where we've launched our training for national security investment consultants.
Right.
My boss was a West Point grad, and he was a phenomenal financial planner. So when he retired, he went into helping other people manage their money. If we're truly in an economic war, and I am certain that we are, and if it's true that the small ships, the Dunkirk-style small ships, have to make a difference, what we do with our spending, our giving, and our investing, weaponized money. You quoted scripture earlier, but here's a quote. If you're not faithful with unrighteous mammon, who will ever trust you with the true riches? Luke 16:11. So we try and train advisors to help people become faithful with unrighteous mammon, to weaponize their money, to help save America, and to help the families.
Right. Yeah.
What if we find a way to partner? We work with your veterans, give them purpose to help continue the fight. They've been in the military serving America. They continue the fight. They go to the next level, and they're helping people take their money and use it in an investment way, as well as spending and giving, that'll help save America.
Yeah, well, I think that makes all the sense in the world. Our veterans inherently understand warfare.
Right.
And so now we're talking about unique types of warfare. From my perspective, part of it is spiritual warfare.
Oh, no question.
Part of it is economic warfare. Part of it is cultural warfare. And our veterans are well suited to go into those spaces and make a significant difference.
I think you're right. It truly is a spiritual war, but it manifests as an economic war, because Jesus said this too. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Right.
And in America, too often, our treasure is our money.
Right. You got that right.
So let's say we do this. Let's say we tie in together, we get veterans, we help people weaponize their money. We're going to train 10,000 financial advisors. That will represent $1 trillion of capital, which will make a difference. What happens then? What will America look like if we return to their founding principles and help people start with their own budget, and then they take it to the federal budget, and then they take it into the world? How can we change the world?
Well, it'll be revolutionary. First, we got to change America. I think we can do that. Changing the world, possibly. I think, regrettably, some of the world will need to be defeated in terms of their approach to robbing our economic cupboards, whether it's intellectual property or other areas. We simply, I don't know that we can get the nations of the world to stand down. We'll have to defeat them. As Ronald Reagan had a tremendous ability to leverage this economic warfare against the Soviet Union, and it became their demise as they tried to keep up with Star Wars and other things. Well, that's probably in our future in another way as well.
Well, and I hope that we can do what we did after World War II. That we can win the war, and then we can export the freedoms, the personal liberties. You know, there are all these domestic enemies that are trying to stop us from pursuing life, liberty, and happiness. And they're trying to limit our liberties because they want us to go into a collectivist, socialist approach.
Right.
So we got to win the battle at home, then we got to win the battle overseas, and then I think we have to export the truth to the rest of the world.
Amen. I'm with you. Sign me up.
Yeah, good. Well, we have to start with Dunkirk. It was a long ways from 1940 Dunkirk to 1945, where we signed the victory.
Right.
But we've got a battle ahead of us. We've got the right people. We've got the right approach. We're just going to have to get to it.
And in the world of Gideon, you know, it wasn't the massive numbers that made the difference. It was the focused, committed people that were willing to go out, be courageous, draw fire, and make a difference.
Yeah. Well, how do we support you? How do we support your work with Healthy Veterans?
Well, folks can go to healthyveterans.org, healthyveterans.org, to find out more about our effort. Obviously, we need financial donations. We need referrals. Not only referrals of people that can help us with resources, but referrals of veterans to come to us that need what we're doing. We have a one-year residential program. We live in a microwave society, but a lot of the challenges that our veterans have are not microwave issues. It takes continuity of care. It takes a holistic environment. At the National Center for Healthy Veterans, we have faith-based trauma recovery and life skills programs, this whole element of faith, family, and profession. We teach them courses on resilience, on trauma recovery, and on career preparation, which includes this economic piece we're talking about.
Great.
And then we put them, one of the primary causal factors of suicide is isolation. So they live in villages, 20 tiny homes in a community center for a village, times 5, 100 total on our property. And we put them through a year of our curriculum and then put them back out on the track to do well. We have, for instance, an Apache pilot that's coming to our place pretty soon. He's not done a great job adjusting to the civilian sector, civilian jobs. He has some family of origin issues and some trauma issues from the military. He has made the determination that it will be a wonderful investment in his life to press pause, come work through our program for a year, and then go back out. And in prediction, I think he'll take off like a shooting star and will do a great job after we get him through this transition process.
So we want to help you do that with many, many veterans. I want to tell you, thank you for your service to this nation, and thank you for what you're doing now. It's going to make a real difference. Now, we're going to provide a link to General Dees' Resilience Trilogy, plus his National Center for Healthy Veterans, how you can support that, all in our Economic Battle Plan. And you can get your free copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.